Eskom wants its fees back and it won't take no for an answer. But analysts are saying that the utility faces far bigger problems.
So the McKinsey and Trillian deal is just a microcosm, but it's a big one. It's a big issue of what is happening inside Eskom. What you have are the authorities and those in leadership allowing massive expenditure unnecessarily.
On Monday, McKinsey said that they'll wait for the country's courts to decide the merits of the case.
Trillian has also subsequently responded. So in other words, this matter now is now in the hands of our lawyers who are dealing directly with the McKinsey and Trillian lawyers.
Civil activists are happy with the latest developments.
We're pleased to see that Eskom is now going to fetch that money. The first thing we want to do is make sure that they're doing it with meaning, with a genuine approach, and that they don't botch those cases. And so we'll be watching them very closely.
Eskom, on the other hand, believes it's a fairly straightforward case.
It doesn't look like a complicated matter because we have given correspondence to both parties, essentially saying that there was something unlawful on our part and some people have not followed the correct procedures, and therefore we would like to rescind the decisions that were taken before.
But it can't end there. Activists want McKinsey and Trillian management to be held accountable.
How did they allow that? How did the McKinsey's leadership go for that and allow it? Even though they might have got the nod from the inside, they know themselves that what they've got has been obtained unlawfully.
So it seems like the lawyers are getting involved here, which means a protracted decision-making process and no end in sight anytime soon. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's take a little deeper into that story. Angelo Coppola, in fact, joins us now live from Johannesburg with more data on this particular issue. So, Angelo, in the last hour, McKinsey now saying that, quote, procurement contracts were solely Eskom's responsibility. That does sound like they're trying to pass the buck and trying to wiggle their way out of not paying that $125 million, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, their terse statement does point in that direction, although who's to say? It's a lot of money in anyone's language, and a lot of the bonuses that were paid based on that $17 million fee, no doubt, are also going to impact here. They also said that they will wait for that court decision, so it does point to a kind of a sit-tight policy. Eskom, on the other hand, is hiding behind or using the defense that senior staff acted unlawfully. So it's been suggested that it will come down to a legal battle on technicalities and precedents, both in South Africa and quite possibly involving US law as well, depending on where the case is heard. Either way, we're in for a really long and drawn-out legal tussle. What happens legally with Trillian, on the other hand, is slightly different. It's a local business that doesn't appear to have assets to cover that almost $40 million fee that it was paid. So do we see a motion perhaps to go for liquidation in Trillian's future? We're going to have to wait and see there, Raman.
Indeed, but that then does raise all sorts of interesting legal conundrums, doesn't it? How is this likely to play out in court, especially when it comes to portioning liability between Eskom, McKinsey and Trillian?
Well, it's only been a week. Everyone, of course, as you know, is now lawyered up, including Trillian. So there's lots of logistics to sort out. There's going to be lots of delaying tactics, no doubt, too. We're assuming that Eskom took legal advice on their approach, that some of their senior staff acted unlawfully. We are also assuming that McKinsey and Trillian also took legal advice. Ultimately, though, the lawyers and the courts are going to be deciding the timelines, and they're obviously going to be making huge fees acting on behalf of their clients, unless, of course, they're working on a contingency basis. The fact that McKinsey is a US domiciled business does make it a little bit more complicated for Trillian, though, because they have an obligation there. Raman?
Indeed. One last question for you, Angelo. We know there are two probes underway at the moment. There's an internal probe taking place in McKinsey that's being carried out by Norton Rose Fulbright. But there's also another separate probe being carried out by the parliamentary committee in charge of public enterprises like Eskom. What's the latest on both of those?
Well, Raman, let's not forget that there's also an investigation into the suspended acting CEO, Coppola, that was supposedly going to start on Wednesday. In terms of the other probes, the Norton Rose Fulbright investigation continues. McKinsey hasn't released any findings for that investigation, which is an internal one. We do know that under American law, of course, US companies have an obligation to report potentially criminal activities of their staff to the US authorities. But we're also aware that the Corruption Watch, the local NGO here, is considering making representations to those same US authorities. On the parliamentary hearings, those start tomorrow, and I'm told many within the utility are eagerly awaiting the start and closure of those hearings so that the truth will finally come out. There are no timelines on the parliamentary hearing or when a report or recommendations are expected there. Tomorrow, of course, sees speakers from Cape Town and Stellenbosch universities in the proverbial dock in Parliament. Between them, they produced a book around Eskom and the trials and tribulations, so they're going to be setting the tone for the hearings going forward, Raman.
Indeed. It should be interesting to see if this actually does get ensnared in the US law system as well under the Foreign Bribery Practice Act. Thank you very much for that. That's Angelo Coppola. They're live, of course, in Johannesburg.